Welcome everyone to the White Collar Advice channel. My name is Justin Paperny. It's really a privilege to welcome my good friend Klete Keller to the show. This is going to be an interesting interview in part because while we're going to publish it on YouTube, we're also going to be directing this to students at our alma mater, USC. I speak at USC routinely. I have for the last 15 years, and I'm really thankful when I reached out to the professor asking if Klete can share his story. His response was, absolutely. We'd love to hear from a former Trojan who's gone through so much. So, Clete, welcome to the show. Let me just jump right in with a question. Can you take us back to when you were a student athlete at USC, the discipline, the hard work, the commitment? Take us back to your USC days.
I loved USC. I'm originally from California. I grew up in near Big Bear, a town called Running Springs, and then lived in Rancho Cucamonga. And when I got to USC, it was a huge change for me because I grew up in a pretty strict household. Um, so all of a sudden, I had all this freedom, and it took a little while for me to adjust. But the one constant for me was the swim team and the discipline it took to be on that team. We had to be at practice every day, twice a day. So there was really no getting around that, and that kind of kept me on the straight and narrow to a degree. And it was fun because you're around your teammates so much, and they just become family. And I'm still in contact with a lot of my teammates from those days. Uh, we lived in a tower called Fluor Tower, which is no longer in existence. Just got torn down a couple summers ago, so that was sad to see. But Fluor Tower was only about 20 steps from the swimming pool. And so, if I had a late night the night before, there were no excuses for me not to be in the pool at, I think it was like 5:30 a.m. the next day. And we were all in the same boat. We all had, a class load, and we kind of there was a bonding around just the hard work and the dedication that it took. And every night, my grades at the beginning weren't so great, so I always had to do study hall. And every night after practice, I would have to go to study hall for, I can't remember how long it was, maybe 2 hours. So the discipline and the regimentation was what I needed uh, at SC. I'm glad I was on the team, and I'm glad they made me do the study hall and they checked if I was in classes, because the freedom that I had compared to my home life was definitely something new and something I needed some direction in managing.
Well, I was also a student athlete at USC, though I knew about 15 minutes into my career as a baseball player that my career would be ending at USC. So it's a wonderful opportunity. I too was at Fluor Tower, right behind the baseball field. We were right on top of each other there, the swimmers and the baseball players. But even before USC, and I think you're humble about the accolades. We'll talk about your experience in Olympics and getting gold medals. I presume because of your success in high school, could you have gone to any university in the country to swim and you fell in love with USC when you did your visit?
Pretty much, yeah. I got a lot of letters, and I didn't really know about the East Coast. Wasn't really that interested, and my family was always big football fans, and of course, USC football has been traditionally great, and um, the people on the team, and that's really what drew me to USC. Was once I took my recruiting trip, the guys on the team just felt like family, and it felt like the place for me.
That's how I felt too. I went to UCLA, some other Pac-10 schools, and then once I stepped on at USC, I said, "This is home. It just feels right." You know, if you're a Trojan, and every student watching this, no, you knew when you're a Trojan. Let's talk about your success swimming, your success as a student athlete, and when did you know that you were? I know you're very humble, but when did you know, like, wow, this is I'm elite. This could lead into Olympics. When did you get a sense that you could be the best in the world at what you did?
I didn't really know for myself until I was about 16. And we went to a meet, it was in Mission Viejo, and there were some really high level swimmers there. And it was kind of my first time competing against them. And I ended up beating a couple of these high level swimmers. And my mind was blown that, first of all, I was able to keep up with them during the race and then actually beat them at the end. So I think my coaches and my parents kind of kept my talent kind of hidden from me. They didn't really talk about it. And I didn't, it didn't really register with me that I was winning when I was an age grouper, all my races and stuff. So it wasn't until that meet in Mission Viejo where I was beating those big names that I knew something could happen. And at that point, the Olympics were about 2 years away, or exactly 2 years away, and I would be 18 at that time. And so at that point, it became a goal. Hey, I think I can do this. Let's try and do this, make the team.
And it was a goal, and did you do it? If so, walk us through what happened next.
Yeah, so the next 2 years were really cool because I finally committed to the sport, and that was one thing that I hadn't done prior to. I had, I worked hard, or what I thought I was hard work. Uh, but then a few things happened where my eyes were opened as to what hard work actually was in the pool. And uh, from that point on, for the next 2 years, I said, I'm going to do everything that I can to be the best I can be. And that, it's simple. It just consisted of beating myself up every day, pushing myself as hard as I could, and barely being able to get out of the water, to press myself out of the water at the end of the workout. Uh, and what was interesting was it took about a month of pushing myself extremely hard before it became normal. Like I really had to force myself to push my effort for that month. But after about a month, it was totally normal and it didn't seem as hard. It was, of course, always difficult because it's like your heart is always racing because you're basically going for a run in the water. That's kind of how I explain it to non-swimmers. So it's physically taxing. There's a lot of exertion, but mentally it becomes easier to do that exertion. And I felt myself getting stronger every day for the next 2 years because I was physically growing, mentally growing, and then I would see my times in practice on repeats get quicker and quicker. And so it really reinforced itself. All my efforts reinforced itself, and I could see my times getting better, and it was more exciting. And then by the time the 2 year Olympic trials rolled around 2 years later, my times were just a little bit slower than the top seeds in the Olympic trial meet. And I knew that, if I were to go best time, that I could potentially make the team, and that's exactly what happened. I ended up breaking
So you participated in your first Olympics when you were 18 years old, and where was that first Olympics?
Yep, that was in Sydney, Australia.
And walk us through that experience of being just an Olympic athlete and representing your country. Because while we were athletes there, I was happy to be on the team. And if I saw my name on the travel squad to Stanford, I was pumped up whether I played or not. But you're at a whole nother level. Walk us through that experience of participating in Olympics in Sydney for that first time and representing your country.
Uh, what I thought
Hmm.
was the neatest part of it was once we finally got to the actual Olympic Village, um, and we saw other countries and other swimmers and other athletes, it really became apparent to me how much people from other countries respect the U.S. We had the flag on pretty much emblazoned all over our body and on all our apparel. And, people were always begging us to trade shirts with them, trade hats, this and that. And uh, there was definitely a sense of power in wearing the flag on your shoulder. And that was really neat. So you could tell people were just excited to see what America was bringing to the Olympics. Like, okay, who are these athletes that are representing America? And uh, just was really an honor to be part of that. I came from, relative obscurity before the Olympic trials to kind of like automatic recognition and respect from other competitors just because I made the American team because it is the hardest team to make, no doubt about it. It's a lot of people say Olympic trials and actually making the American team is harder than the Olympics itself, which is true because sometimes the top 3 or 4 times at Olympic trials would get medals at the Olympics, but we're only allowed to bring 2 people per event. So once we got there, we had I think it was about a month and a half before everyone meets up at a training camp in the US, and then we go to the time zone that the Olympics are in, and just to acclimate to the time and continue training. And so over that month and a half or so, we really get close with, our other American teammates. And we may not have known them very well before the Olympics because, they're from Texas or the East Coast or wherever. I was from California. So a lot of these people I hadn't spent much time with, but by the time we all got to the games, we had really bonded. We played a lot of board games and stuff like that during our downtime, and we were definitely a team by the time we got there. And just the coming together of everybody was really special, and we felt like it was us against the world because literally that's what it was.
What was the result of that first Olympics, the medal count, if any?
Um, it was as a team, it was the best we had done since the 70s. I think we got the most golds we had ever gotten since some point in the 1970s. As a team, we broke a lot of world records in individual races. We won the gold medal count by a long shot. And then personally, I got a bronze in the 400 freestyle, which is an individual event, and then a silver in the 4x200 freestyle relay. We got beat by the Australians and Ian Thorpe, who was maybe the biggest name at those games. But overall, it was a very successful team effort, and the American swim team did better than many Olympics prior.
I mean, I love hearing this. We're friends. You worked with our team, White Collar Advice, but even now it sounds corny. I don't care. It's my channel. I think it's so cool, man. You were in the Olympics getting medals. I have such admiration for you. I do want to discuss, see, I grew up in the baseball world. So friends of mine, teammates at USC, Aaron Boone, Jeff Jenkins, my roommate, Jock Jones, they could expect to go on and make tens of millions of dollars. They had career aspiration. Even friends of mine at USC who went on to have really long career in the big leagues often said, it kind of feels like a job already now that I'm at USC, but I know this is my ticket to an income being a baseball player. It's different though as a swimmer, right? Because there's not like a professional swimmers league. So after you come back from the Olympics and you've won medals and you're an American hero, you can't go to the draft and make millions in the big leagues. How do you sustain yourself as you prepare for the next Olympics? Walk us through that.
Yeah, it's really tough to make a living with swimming, and really just kind of a fortunate few are able to do so. Um, and I was surprised to learn that a lot of it depends on how the economy is doing. So if you're going to get paid to swim, it's typically coming from a swim apparel maker. So Speedo, Arena, TYR, Nike ended up getting in the game for a while. And um, really, there's the top tier, and those are people like Phelps and Lochte, those type of names who are getting other sponsorships that are not swimming related, things like AT&T and whatnot. But the vast majority of the other people who do get sponsored, kind of the tier two folks are, and I put myself in that category. I was sponsored by Speedo, and I'm very grateful for that. I was able to subsist just off of that sponsorship, and they paid me very well. I'm very thankful for that. Uh, and then there are some swimmers who were just maybe tier three, and they had to make a hard decision. Am I going to continue swimming in a sport where I'm not making any money, really? The national team will give you a stipend if you are a certain world ranking in your event. So some of those people would have that stipend, but it wasn't quite enough. You need that extra sponsorship to get you over the hump so you can focus exclusively on swimming. So I was able to do that pretty much all throughout my professional career. And when the economy started getting real rough, I think 2007, they a lot of the swim apparel companies cut a lot of their sponsored athletes, and a lot of them had to drop out. So it's it's really you got to either love the sport or be good enough to get paid enough to not have to work while you're doing it, because working and swimming, it's just not gonna happen.
Tomorrow, I mentioned on the February 1st, students will see this later. I'm playing in the annual USC alumni game, and I'll see some friends who endured so many years in the minor leagues, and then they got that break and they went on to have successful careers. Others hung around 7, 8, 9 years in the minor leagues, making $1,500 a month, and they didn't make it. So they're really beginning to rebuild or start their career 29, 30, or 31 years old. It's harder, but it was a price they were willing to pay as they pursued their dreams. Before we get into, I know a number of people watching this are going to want to hear about January 6th and the case and the conviction and things like that. I do want to wrap up a few more minutes on your swimming careers. I understand that you participated in three Olympics. Can you walk us through the second and third Olympics and where they were and just what that experience continued to be like? I presume you don't ever get tired of representing your country in the Olympics. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so the second games was in Athens, Greece, and the Olympic trials were in Long Beach at an outdoor venue, uh, almost right on the water. So it was really cool because most Olympic trials are held indoors, and this was the first one that had been outdoors. And growing up in Southern California, it was extra special in that sense to be able to qualify for the team in Long Beach. And what was weird about that qualification was that I felt an extreme amount of pressure to just make the team because I had already done it once before. And if, if I didn't make it, I felt that would be a big failure. And so making it, I put a lot more pressure. I was so much more nervous before each race. And when I finished my races and I qualified for the team, it was more of a feeling of relief than actual happiness or joy. So that was a big change. And then at that Olympics in Athens, Greece, that was 2004. The venue was also outdoors. I think the climate in Greece is very similar to Southern California. So that was a really unique opportunity as well to swim outdoors at an Olympics. That was the only outdoor venue that I had ever competed at for all three games. And that one, that's kind of where Michael Phelps broke out. He had, I think he got 6 golds there. So not quite his 8, but he was well on his way to becoming, Michael Phelps that everybody knows today. Um, and that one I did very well in our relay, the 4x200 relay. We actually beat the Australians this time around. And I was fortunate enough to anchor that relay and was able to touch out the guy on the Australian team who was Ian Thorpe, very good swimmer, very big name. And we got that gold. And then I was also in a race that they termed the race of the century at that point because of the names that were in it. It was a 200 freestyle. And I think Ian Thorpe ended up winning that. Some guy from the Netherlands got second, and then Phelps got third, and then I got fourth. And nothing great happens if you finish fourth, but I was actually pretty pleased with that placing because it wasn't my strongest event, and to go against all those big names was really cool. Then I also got a bronze in my 400 freestyle at that one. So I loved Athens. That might have been my favorite one. Sydney was really cool because it was the first, but Athens to be at the home of the Olympics where they began was really cool. And there's so much marble there. I was stunned with how much marble there is. Even the sidewalks are made out of marble. So it was really cool to see their culture. I didn't get to see the beach much, but it was a beautiful place. And like I said, that was probably my favorite. And then the last games I did was in 2008. That was in Beijing, China. And that one was really different. Uh, Beijing really put on a show. The opening ceremonies, I never went to an opening ceremonies because my race was always the very next day. And if you go to the opening ceremonies, it's like a 5 to 7 hour ordeal where you're in a staging area standing, then you parade through, and then you stand some more afterwards. So you're on your feet for a long time, and that's not good for a sport like swimming where you need to be well rested for your race. But I remember trying to sleep that night, and all the fireworks they were shooting off during the opening ceremonies, they went on for, it felt like an hour. Most fireworks I had ever heard. And that was China's big coming out party to the world where they wanted to showcase how advanced they were getting and how they were moving into first world status. So they really put on a great show. Uh, it was very intimidating going out of the village after the games concluded. I didn't really go around much, just because of the language barrier. And it's a huge city, and it was really overwhelming for me and our safety personnel for the games said, it's probably best not to really go walking around. There was an incident before the game started where a family member of one of the volleyball players was killed when they were doing a tourist tour. They were seeing a tourist attraction and sadly got killed. So that kind of put a little damper on appreciating the area. But being in China was a crazy. It was really neat. It was a cool experience. But I mostly just wanted to get home. And by that point, my I didn't make the events I wanted to make leading into that Olympics. So I was just on a relay, and I only swam in the prelims and not the finals at night. So for me, it was kind of a failure, that Olympic Games, but nonetheless, very fun and very proud to have represented the country at that point.
And when that Olympic Games was over, that was essentially the was that the end of your swimming career?
It
And then
was, yep.
it's time to become a regular working dude. Is that what happens next? Like what do you do after your career ends? I would argue as an American hero, 3 Olympics, medals, incredible relationships, sponsorships. What is the next phase once your career ended?
Well, that was very difficult because it ends and it's over. There's no gradual dimming of the lights. The lights just go out. And that was really tough. I still had 2 years worth of classes I needed to finish, so I went back to SC and finished my degree at the School of Public Policy, and got my degree in public policy and real estate development. And some personal things. I ended up moving to Michigan, getting married, and really needing to dive into the job market right away into an area that was kind of economically depressed during the GFC, the global financial crisis. And so I had gone from, making a great salary swimming to living in Michigan, one of the hardest hit regions during the crisis, and just getting started in the workplace. And it was extremely difficult transition for me and one that I failed at.
Well, first off, I commend you for going back to get your degree. I know so many friends of mine who got huge signing bonuses for Major League Baseball teams. Oftentimes, the contract would have a supplement like we'll pay for college. And the teams like to do that and set that aside because they know so many won't actually go back to college, and that's money they won't actually have to spend.
Mhm.
That's why a lot of people would say, no, just give me the money, and if I go to college, I'll pay for it. So I commend you for going back to get your degree. You mentioned it was a transition. You didn't succeed initially. And walk us through, did you stick with it? Did you transition into a new industry? As you were talking, 2018, 2019, 20. What are you doing to sustain yourself and your family through these ups and downs?
I tried a bunch of things. So they were mostly sales related. Um, and it really made me reflect on my time in school and basically all my time leading up to then. I should have planned more. I learned a lot that it didn't really serve me at the time, but I was like, man, if I could go back in time and actually chart a course to pursue a specific career once I was done, rather than just thinking I would be fine and be able to land a great job, would have been a lot better. So I kind of hopped from job to job, and these were sales commission only jobs, and uh, I wasn't ready for that. Uh, I kind of got thrown into the fire. I did insurance sales, which is, I think, uh, one of the most difficult sales careers you can have is selling insurance. So that was a real trial by fire, and it's actually, while it was not great at the time, it's served me well since to become comfortable talking with people and just making connections and trying to connect with people as quickly as possible. It's served me now, but it was a really hard transition for, gosh, I don't know, 5 years or so afterwards, where I was so exhausted from my swimming career. I had poured literally my entire body into something for, gosh, I don't know, 20 years or so. And, the last 12 years of that were like extreme levels of training. So I was physically exhausted, I was mentally exhausted, and I just didn't have the juice to to get it done. And then there were some family issues on top of that. So It was not an easy time for me, and it was one that struggled and ultimately ended up in me getting divorced. And uh, it's I don't regret it. I don't regret any of it. It was just a learning. I had to start from scratch. A lot of my peers had gotten into their career 8 years before I did. I was swimming, and they were probably going through those difficult times while, long ago. And so basically, I had to start over and learn and get all the bumps and bruises um, much later in life, and when I had a family, which is unfortunate, but I feel like I'm better for it today.
There's no doubt, even friends of mine who played in the big leagues for a very long time and might not ever have to work again suffer from issues once it's over, finding meaning, something new to do. In many ways, that they'll always identify as that athlete, but they've got to try and do something new. And of course, many who were successful, but maybe not successful enough, they're getting going in new careers. So I know it's not an easy transition. And now let's transition into we'll talk about how you found our team a few years back, and let's talk about a decision that has brought more attention to you besides your three Olympics and everything you've done to contribute to the Olympic Games. Let's talk about what happened on January 6th, going back several years, and some of the motivations leading up to that day, perhaps what that experience was like. And I do want to talk about, despite the pardon, which we'll get into, why you chose to accept responsibility once you learned that you were a target of a government investigation. Let's just talk about some of your motives leading up to that day.
Yeah, so um, my motives. I have always been,
In other words, did someone say, let's go, or did you introduce the idea? Did you just happen to be there? How did you end up there?
well, I've always been interested in politics. When I was growing up in Southern California and having to drive to practice sometimes an hour at a time if we got stuck in traffic, AM radio was always on. And it was always on in the house as well. And so I was very exposed to politics. And I think just, by those circumstances, whether I wanted to or not, I gained an interest in what was going on politically in our country. And I think also being at the Olympics and having the flag on my cap and stuff like that really got me even more deeply invested in America and all the things it stands for. So when the time of January 6th rolled around, I was very invested in the cultural issues of the day and also the political issues of the day at that time. Um, I had just kind of really immersed myself in narratives on Twitter, and um, I was kind of uh, I was in way over my head, and I was just totally consumed by things. There was a lot of upheaval culturally, and uh, that's kind of what led me to go there. Um, I felt um, that the Republican Party and Trump represented government of, by, and for the people better than the other side. And my feelings were that there was a lot of uh, questionable activities that had taken place that weren't addressed, and that my only outlet was to go there and engage in my First Amendment rights to protest. And so Trump issued a tweet and said, "Hey, come out here and let's help give our Congress people some steel in their spine to do what they need to do and object to the electors, the slate of electors." And so thought to myself, well, he's called us, and I feel like this is really our only avenue, and I should do it. And the month before, I think it was in November, there was a rally, and it was actually a great experience because there was a lot of people there. It was on a Saturday. It was beautiful weather, and it was very happy. Everyone was just, um, we were there supporting the country, and we were upset that the election did not look free and fair. But it was very cathartic to talk with other people who felt the same way at that time in November. So when January rolled around, I figured, this will be kind of the same sort of thing, and I think it'll be a good experience again. I felt I had no outlet, and all the media at the time were silencing any kind of dissent or any counter narrative to what was going on, and I felt hopeless. And I also had some personal issues going on in my life with my children at the time, and difficulty in seeing them and stuff like that. So um, I invested in it way more than I should have, because I just felt maybe I could help change something and add my body to the mass of people who are there to protest.
And on the day of the event, as it was transpiring, given your, did you get a sense like when did you get a sense this is going differently than I'd expected, or different than what might have happened in the month before in November? Like, hey, this isn't what I had expected to happen today.
It was almost immediate, because the weather was really rough. It was cold, it was windy, overcast. And the other thing is, it was on a Wednesday. So the people who, decided to take off work and go out to DC on a Wednesday, it's a different crowd than the group who decides they're going to go to DC for a Saturday. And so these people were very passionate, definitely a different socioeconomic crowd compared to the month before. I would characterize it as some real diehards. And so just seeing the different type of people there, and then the atmosphere and the climate itself were totally different. And it was interesting, because I got off the metro and started walking towards the ellipse. And one of the first things that happened was I rolled my ankle just walking down the street, like a severe roll of my ankle. And I've always had loose ankles, and I should have taken that as a sign, as like, okay, this is weird. So it was right away that I felt it was different.
So you know that it's different. As I recall, you weren't there terribly long, but you were there the day EE erupts, as many would argue. And then when do you learn that you are the target of a government investigation? Do they arrest you? Does someone show up at your front door? Do you see yourself over the television, perhaps an image? How did you know?
Well, so there was a bunch of speeches, and the highlight was supposed to be Trump speaking and bringing up or bringing up evidence as for the stolen election. And he took forever to hit the stage, to get on the stage. And once he finally did, it was just kind of another standard stump speech, campaign speech type of thing. So people were bored of that pretty quickly. And it had been circulating on Twitter that, okay, this is basically a 3-part day. There's going to be something in the morning, and then there's the speeches, and then we're going to walk to the Capitol as stage 3. And so a lot of people left Trump's speech as he was speaking to just walk over to the Capitol. Everyone was freezing. They didn't want to stand around. So I think they just started walking, and there were some food trucks along the way, and I stopped and got some food. And um, by the time we got to the Capitol building, it was just, DC is such a beautiful place. And I stopped to appreciate the scenery and look back towards the Washington Monument, and could see people starting to trickle in. And then it became a whole sea of people coming towards the Capitol building. And I decided that I wanted to get as close to the action as possible. I had kind of a morbid curiosity of crowd control, seeing the BLM stuff leading up to it all that year, and all the confrontations they had with various police departments and stuff. I was curious to see how it all worked out in a crowd. And so I wanted to be part of it, and I wanted to get as close to the building as I could. And so that's just what I did. It was really easy to walk up to the building. There were bike racks. There were bike racks separating the building from the crowd. And after, I was standing there for, I don't know, maybe a half hour before things started getting out of control or started getting heated. I think it was during that time Pence released he released a tweet saying that he was not going to object to the electors, and he was just gonna, stamped the election, and that's when the mood changed. There wasn't a lot of um, reception on people's cell phones, so it just kind of slowly percolated throughout the crowd that, Pence wasn't going to do what everyone was hoping he was going to do. And that's when people started getting angry, and they also, the police were starting to use some countermeasures to get the crowd to back up. And that's when people started losing their temper and, um, playing tug of war with the bike racks, with the police and stuff like that. And then, seemed like each side would escalate, and, the police would start shooting tear gas into the crowd, and that would anger some of them. And people would start yelling. And so it just kind of kept getting more and more serious. And by this point, I was just kind of enthralled with the whole thing. I felt like a spectator. It felt like I wasn't really there, but I also felt really reckless. I was at that point, I had just gotten a very upsetting judgment from my family court case about, I don't know, 2 weeks or so before. And so consequences of actions were not at the forefront of my mind. And I just was feeling angry, and I wanted to interrupt things. I wanted to disrupt, and I wanted to flip the middle finger to those that I thought had wronged me and the country, and ended up going too far. And I ended up, inside the building. And it was a really weird dynamic, because on one hand, it did feel serious, and then on the other hand, it didn't. Because when I walked in, there were 5 police in the hallway that I walked in at. And, I asked them tongue in cheek, "Hey, do you mind if I come in?" And they didn't look at me. They didn't say a single word. They just stared straight ahead. And so I said, "Oh, okay, well, just go in." And when I got in there, it was kind of like uh, almost like a party atmosphere. There were people drinking beers and, um, just kind of like, I don't know, goofing around really. And so it didn't seem, once we were in there, it didn't seem that severe. And then, after about, I don't know, however long there was, well, people were, once you got in there, everyone kind of dispersed. And down a hallway was this, I had no idea how the place was laid out, but you go this way and it's the Senate chamber, you go that way, it's the congressional chamber. So I did go down towards the Senate chamber, and there were a line of cops there. And that's where I yelled profanities and stuff like that. And um, it felt like, what's that term? Uh, Civil disobedience. It felt like civil disobedience at the time, and I felt justified doing it because I had seen a lot of protests in DC and around the country that, people were doing some really serious stuff, like throwing Molotov cocktails and stuff. And I didn't see any of that. So I said, okay, well, this isn't that bad. So, I feel like this is okay. Um, and then as, the police came into the rotunda, they started trying to push everyone out. And that's when it started getting um, chaotic again, because there was a double door at one end of the rotunda. So you needed to get an entire group of people that were in this rotunda to funnel down to this double door to exit. And that's when a lot of the police shoved, they compressed us. And that's when some people lost it and started, running into the police, throwing water bottles and stuff at the police. And I told myself, I'm not going to engage physically with any police, but I'm not going to just leave either. I'm going to make them push me out. And so that's what I did. I was in there for 55 minutes, or 50 some odd minutes total. I think it was 50. And, I had plenty of opportunities to leave. I saw, I saw uniformed military come in at one point, and I felt, oh, wow, this is getting serious. And actually, towards the beginning, when I first went in there, and when I was in the hallway that led to the Senate chamber, there was 2 young kids who came sprinting towards us, and they said, "They're firing real bullets." And come to find out later, that was the Ashley Babbitt incident. So it didn't feel real at the time. From someone in the crowd's perspective, um, it didn't feel that severe. But looking back, I could definitely see how it was the opposite to the police and the lawmakers that day. Had to be very scary for them because there were a lot of us, and you know, I did interact with some people that were going really crazy, and they definitely had some screws loose. So, but the mindset I was in was, it was just so weird and foggy. It was strange. Uh,
Well, it's interesting, even though students at USC in an accounting ethics class will be watching this, Clee touched on something that's really relevant. It's a teaching moment. Every American, every human faces some pressures, and some people may rationalize those pressures. Clee just mentioned other demonstrations with cocktails. They were doing that. We weren't doing that here. That's the rationalization. And then no one can get into trouble. Many of friends of mine who are professional baseball players who have used steroids for a long time under the idea they can only play in the big leagues if they're taking steroids because everybody else is doing it. Or in this case, Cleat was facing some personal pressures, and then there's the opportunity. No one can get into trouble without an opportunity. And the opportunity was that day, January 6th, right? And making some choices that brought real upheaval to other people's lives and your own. Let's begin to talk about the aftermath, and I'll jump to the end and work our way back. Cleet called me perhaps 7 or 8 months later after he had been watching some of our YouTube videos. And he also watched an interview we did with a federal judge. And in that interview with the federal judge, Judge Boo says, if you break my window, don't say sorry. Tell me how you're going to fix the window. And Cleet essentially said, I've made some bad decisions. I've accepted responsibility. Can you help me demonstrate to my judge how I'm beginning to fix the window? Right? How in the totality of my life, I've been law abiding, I've been productive, I played for our country. But these are some bad decisions, and I'm hoping that he'll take everything into consideration. So, can you walk through the acceptance process, Cleet, and perhaps how the consequences that followed attending the Capitol on that day?
yeah, so it didn't really hit the severity of what I had just participated in. Didn't hit me while I was on site. But when I was going back to my hotel, I had to get on the metro again, and there was a father and son who noticed my Olympic jacket and asked me if I was an Olympian, and I tried to dodge the issue, and eventually they kind of figured it out, and the boy wanted a picture with me, and that's when it really hit, where I was like, oh my gosh, this father and son have no idea where I just was and what I was doing. And they're giving me this respect that feels totally unearned and totally dirty right now, because of what I had just been involved with. So that was the first time. And then when I got back to my hotel, I, turned on the TV and saw how many police organizations had to respond to, quell the riot. And uh, the gravity of it finally sunk in. And, as time went on, learning of injured police officers and damage to the building, um, really became a heavy burden. And, I had a clean record up till then. I had never been in trouble with the law. And, I saw in people's reactions how much it really hurt them and emotionally and harmed them. And leading up to that, I thought, well, this is just like any other protest that gets out of hand. Um, uh, but once I saw the real world reaction to it, I felt huge guilt, and I felt embarrassment, and especially to my community, my workplace. They got just blown up with calls, thousands of calls for days and days, and people weren't able to do their work because they were fielding calls about me, and it really affected the company. And so, when I started seeing these real life ramifications of it, I really felt bad. I really felt regretful, and I wanted to do something to try to begin to make amends. And um, that started with taking responsibility and taking the plea or pleading guilty. and cooperating with the government was the first step that I thought I could do to begin to make amends, was to just help them in their investigation and, uh, try to move forward. And I knew it was a huge case, and they approached me and said they needed help to get other people to take responsibility for what they did, because a lot of the momentum at the time was, some people were, very unremorseful and saying, oh, they deserved it and all this and that. And so we kind of needed some help to say, hey, we gotta take responsibility here. And I was happy to do that.
On one of our first calls, we mentioned this is a crisis you've created. And I said, one way to get through it is to somehow let this experience become an asset, as hard as that can be. It's been an asset in my life, not just because I went into the prison or compliance speaking space, because of lessons I've learned. I think it's made me a better person through a lot of turmoil to get here. And I'm still working to become better, as are you, as we all are. But you said, make this an asset. So talk for a moment about even beginning to contribute to our nonprofit. So our nonprofit, Prison Professors, we influence 1 million people in prisons and jails. It's a first step act approved program. And of course, it's led by my partner, Michael Santos, who served 26 years in prison. Can you just spend a moment or two? I know not everyone watching this is that interested in it, believe me, I know. But just spend a moment or two about that interview with Michael and just knowing like this interview and the course you helped create about the discipline and commitment to become a world-class athlete, at least finding some meaning through this experience, because I know it's something your judge referenced at your sentencing hearing.
Yeah, finally, after meeting with you guys, I felt like I could do something tangible to, try to, put something on the other side of the scale that was positive. What I did was so weighty and so severe. I needed to do something to try to reestablish balance, and I'll probably be doing that for the rest of my life. But I felt, you know, as a guy, there's not a lot of resources for young men these days, in my opinion. And it's very easy, I think, to wind up in a situation like I did, where you're not thinking clearly. Maybe whatever might have been affecting you in your personal life leads to you taking actions that you otherwise wouldn't, and then you pay the consequences for stepping over the line. And so I realized that what made me successful in swimming uh, can actually help people who are now in the justice system. And I was in the justice system as well. And so for me to understand that I have some experience that can help these guys who no doubt have been in difficult situations and are now paying the price for making bad decisions. If I can go back to the point in my life where I was making good decisions and it paid off, and try to help these guys that are in jail make good decisions for when they get out, to turn their life around and become productive, and maybe get back in their families' lives and accomplish goals. I'm really excited about that. And talking with Michael and going over those goals that I set all those years back, and what helped me achieve those goals, and then the outcome of all the work I put in, and the hardship I had overcame, and during the process, it really feels rewarding to help pass that on to people who are in the justice system and who are in jail for however long. And they do these courses, and they can get credit to their credited towards their sentence. And I think I wish I would have had, my dad wasn't really in my life. I didn't really have a lot of I had great coaches that were mentors, but I definitely had a shortage of male mentors. And if I can be that in some degree to men who are struggling, I'm very proud to do that. And I'm so grateful to talk to Michael. I got off really easy. I only spent a day in prison, or I guess it wouldn't be called prison. I only spent a day in jail. But that was enough for me. And
Well, let's talk about the day of your sentencing for a moment,
yeah.
because it was high profile and your phone was off. So I continued to Google it. And then
Mhm.
I sent you a text message. and it said 36 months. And my text to you is, oh my God, I just Googled it. It said 36 months. And I thought that was 36 months in prison. Then I said, I kept reading and it said you were sentenced, I think, to supervision of 36 months and some home confinement. And your response was your messaging, the record that you had built over a sustained period of time, the tangible asset that you mentioned really influenced your judge. And as I understand it, he commented on those tangible assets. He confirmed with the government this community service contribution you had done through our nonprofit. And the sense was, and I remember even before sentencing, you said, even if I go to prison, I like knowing I've done everything to try to demonstrate why I'm a candidate for leniency. But as I understand it, those tangible assets you created influenced your judge and helped you avoid prison.
Yeah, my judge specifically mentioned the program I was doing to the program I created to the prosecutor. And he said, look, he's already been working in the community and he's trying to make a difference. And I believe that his sentence would best be spent back out in the community, continuing to make a difference rather than just sitting in a cell. And I was so incredibly grateful for that and the recognition he had for that. Um, and it made a huge difference. And the other thing is that it was genuine. I didn't reach out to you guys to say, hey,
Help me
I want,
game this. I don't want to game the system or any tips and tricks. You said, whatever happens, I just want to do the work and show that I'm different, that I want to be a candidate for leniency because there's no guarantee what's going to happen. We can't change the past. We're not magicians here, but you were willing to do the work.
yeah. And there was 3 years between my indictment and my sentencing. Those 3 years were so difficult.
The hardest part.
Yes. And I think just trying to get out of my own head and trying to make a difference to others, by doing the program it was a huge breath of fresh air, and it was a light in my life. If you want to stop focusing on your own problems and your own issues, I've learned, help other people with theirs. And so I contacted you guys. I still had plenty of time to go before sentencing. And I'm so grateful that I was able to do that program, and it's out to over a million people.
When you did it, it was about 300,000 people, and we have incredible people in our community. I've mentioned Michael formed a relationship with CZ, the founder of Binance, the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world. Michael was just in Dubai with CZ, and he's advancing our efforts to really promote more prison reform, more initiatives than the First Step Act. We think we send too many people to prison at too great taxpayer expense. If victims are created and it's nonviolent, we think people should be working and paying them back. So we're advocating for more reform. But yes, based on the support of people like you, CZ, Bill McGlashan, Massimo from the Varsity Blues case, and White Collar Advice. We're big donors to the nonprofit. We're up to about 1 million people. So we're grateful you participated. Let's talk about post-sentencing. It's good to get clarity. And even though you avoided prison, we'll get into the pardon in a moment, there are still lifelong collateral consequences of a conviction. Prison can be the easiest part because it's clearly defined with a beginning and an end. Even though you avoided prison, the fallout was, many would say, just continuing or just starting in so many ways. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, it's the collateral consequences are huge. It's reputation is shattered. I lost a lot of business clients. I'm in commercial real estate, and I lost plenty of clients. And you got the fines, you've got lawyer fees, and I was just crushed by all that. Um, but I that's what happens when you cross the line and make a bad decision. There are consequences. So really all I can do now is, and I told the judge in my allocution statement that this has really put a lot of things in perspective, that really to boil it all down, I just want to have a positive impact on my immediate surroundings as much as possible. And I think that's all I can do. When I when I went to January 6th thinking I could change something, I was thinking about this huge macro picture. And really what I've learned is you just have to be a positive influence on your immediate area. And what I was most surprised of after the sentence, I did lose friendships. I have family that doesn't talk to me. It was very economically damaging. But it's also really rewarding because once you've been stripped bare of everything, if anyone comes back in your life, that's because they really actually care about you and that relationship is real. And I had several friends that I hadn't spoken to in years that actually reached back out. And I'm so grateful to now know who the real people are in my life and who matters and who counts. And, I want to be that person for others. And another thing that I was really surprised of was I live in a liberal part of town, and my neighbors were some of the most supportive people, and they're the complete opposite side of the political spectrum from me. And that's really made me just appreciate people for people and not uh, whatever political beliefs they may have. My landlord even, she could have probably should have kicked me out, but she showed me mercy and let me stay. And the mercy that I've been shown by true friends and true neighbors and true real people has really been humbling and really an amazing experience. One thing I'm really glad to get out of this whole thing.
Let's talk about the pardon before I do. I want to reiterate through all of our conversations and work, no complaining. You can share the story and talk about some of the pressures and rationalizations. You do that to take people back to what you were thinking and why you committed a crime. But there's always been this acceptance and wishing that you could have done things differently and you're doing better moving forward. And I admire that in you, and that's why you'll be successful. That's the only way to overcome a felony conviction, some level of acceptance, finding the value, never complaining, appreciating what remains rather than fixating all that we have lost. But let's talk about what remains in gratitude. Let's talk about this pardon and how you received the news. And I know you've done a lot of media with the Washington Post, Fox, and elsewhere after you received the pardon. How did you receive the news, and what does it feel like?
Uh, so the pardon is biggest relief on this whole experience was the sentencing where the judge showed me mercy and didn't sentence me to the max, which was 20 years. The pardon is, I would say, almost equal to that. I didn't realize at the time that it was actually happening because I don't have cable TV, and the way I found out was that I started getting some text messages from friends saying, "Hey, it looks like you're pardoned." And me and my wife got on YouTube and found a live stream and saw Trump in the Oval Office, doing his executive orders, and we rewound it and saw the pardon executive order, and it was just such a relief. I don't know if people are going to debate whether it's deserved or not. I don't know if I deserved it. I had totally come to terms with my felony conviction. I had served my sentence. I cooperated with the government, and I was totally at peace with being a convicted felon the rest of my life and having half the country hate me, and they still will, but it's just another act of mercy that I didn't expect, and I'm just so grateful for. And what it does is it just makes me want to live my life in a more wholesome manner going forward. And I want to be deserving of that pardon through my actions going forward. It's a tremendous gift to be granted
All right.
that.
Before my last question, people can debate pardons, but I believe you should, if you've pled guilty and accepted responsibility and built a new record, you should be a candidate for a pardon. You might have been on one side of the spectrum. Jerry Lundergan in our community was pardoned by President Biden on his last day in the office. He was convicted at trial, served time in prison. He too contributed to our nonprofit that influences 1 million people. The DOJ referenced that nonprofit in their release. So while he's a Democrat and perhaps you were a conservative, by doing the work and building a record, that's how I think somebody earns a pardon. I think you earned it. You accepted responsibility, you contributed, you gave back, you volunteered, you never blamed and excused it, and you got this pardon. Last question for students watching at USC, and I'm grateful that you've given so much time and it's just organic interview. Students at USC are watching this interview. What's just one piece of advice you have for them as they begin to graduate and embark on continue on there with their young life. Give us a final piece of advice for students at our alma mater.
I would say to um, always be mindful of the thoughts in your head and what you're thinking and what you're exposing yourself to, because thoughts lead to behaviors, which lead, I would say, thoughts lead to beliefs, which lead to behaviors, which lead to actions. And they're all linked together. And if you have negative thoughts and eventually, like me, you could potentially not care about your actions and how they may affect others. It all starts with what's going on in your head. So think about, always be aware of what you're thinking. If there's an issue you have, you know, flesh it out, talk to others. Don't let it affect your behavior and your beliefs and ultimately your actions, because you can get yourself in trouble if you go down the wrong road.
I guess one last thing is if God forbid you make a mistake civilly or criminally, personally, professionally, to the extent as you did, accept responsibility and not make matters worse, do that because you took accountability pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Taking accountability was probably the saving grace in my case. And the judge and the prosecutor both said that how much they appreciated me coming to them. I surrendered to them. They didn't have to come out and find me. Uh, I went to them and I made it easy for them. I took responsibility. I took the plea deal and I did everything I could to work with them. And showing remorse and backing up that remorse with actions really goes a long way. It did in my case with the prosecutor and the judge, and I think it also does in everyday life if you ever come across a situation where, remorse is needed.
So that's how I'll close. As human beings, we make bad decisions. And if you do, you can respond like Cleet, accept it. In my case, you'll hear me when I speak at USC on Friday, February 21st. You'll hear me tell a story of when I lectured at the FBI Academy after my release from prison. Paul Bertrand, the FBI agent that arrested me, who invited me to speak, introduced me to 1,000 FBI agents and said, had Justin responded appropriately during his government investigation, had he not lied and obstructed an investigation, we wouldn't have referred him for prosecution. He wouldn't have gone to prison. How you respond to bad choices really matters, Cleese. I'm grateful that you're my friend. To know you as an alum, thank you for sharing your story so openly, despite the praise and criticism that is inevitably going to come your way. But thank you for speaking openly and contributing today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Justin.